Willow Creek was a peaceful neighborhood where everything had to be perfect. The lawns were always trimmed to the same standard, the mailboxes were uniform, and the Homeowners Association, HOA, made sure everyone followed the rules. John Harper moved to this neat little suburb 3 years ago with his daughter Lily. He was a quiet man, tall and strong, but reserved. No one knew he was the county sheriff. He kept that part of his life a secret, especially after his wife passed away. He wanted a safe, calm place for Lily, who was 12 and in a wheelchair due to a condition from her childhood. Though she couldn't walk, Lily had a big smile and loved watching the world around her. They lived in a modest house at the end of Elm Street, where John had built a ramp for Lily so she could get inside with ease. Most of the neighbors were kind, but Karen Mitchell was an exception. Karen was the head of the HOA and acted like she ran the entire neighborhood. Loud, nosy, and always criticizing people for the smallest things, like a flower pot not being in the right spot or a car parked too long, she had made it her mission to control everything. From the moment John and Lily arrived, Karen didn't approve of them. She stared at the ramp with disdain, muttering under her breath about it ruining the neighborhood's aesthetic. John, wanting to keep things calm for his daughter, stayed polite, even when Karen glared at them. The atmosphere in Willow Creek grew tense. John remembered the first day they moved in. It was a rainy afternoon, and he was carrying Lily inside while unpacking. He had hoped this would be a fresh start for them, but Karen's sharp voice quickly shattered that hope. She complained about their moving truck blocking the road. John ignored her, thinking she would go away. But that was just the beginning. Karen's eyes were always on them, and trouble was brewing. It all started with the wheelchair ramp John had built. One morning, Karen marched over, clipboard in hand, and pointed at it. "This is unapproved," she declared, her voice loud. "It's ugly and violates HOA rules." John looked up from what he was doing, his hands dirty as he tightened a bolt. "It's for Lily," he replied quietly, "she needs it to get inside." Karen jotted something down and walked off without a word. John hoped that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. Next, Karen found more things to complain about. Lily had therapy equipment, braces, and a small mat in the garage. One day, Karen saw it when the door was open and sent a fine in the mail, calling it clutter that ruined the neighborhood's appearance. Then, she began complaining about the faint marks Lily's wheelchair left on the sidewalk. "This is vandalism," she shouted one day, waving her arms dramatically. Another time, Lily sat on the porch humming to herself when Karen stormed up and said the noise was too much and ordered them to keep it down. John stayed calm every time, simply responding, "It's for Lily." He paid the fines or fixed whatever she demanded, but his patience was wearing thin. The neighbors could feel the tension, too. Mrs. Carter, an elderly woman who lived next door, would often shake her head and mutter, "Poor Lily doesn't deserve this." She was fond of the Harpers but feared Karen's temper. Other kids used to play with Lily, pushing her wheelchair or tossing her a ball, but when Karen was around, they'd scatter, scared of being yelled at. The street grew quieter, and the Harpers felt more isolated. Lily started noticing. One evening, as John pushed her chair inside, she looked up at him with big, questioning eyes. "Why does she hate us, Dad?" she asked in a small voice. John's heart sank. He knelt down beside her and brushed her hair back. "She doesn't hate you, sweetheart," he lied softly, "some people just don't understand. You're perfect to me." Lily nodded, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. John hugged her tightly, feeling a protective fire stir within him. He didn't want her to feel like this, but Karen wasn't letting up. Karen's complaints escalated. She'd walk by their house more often, glaring at Lily whenever she sat outside. Once, John overheard her talking to a neighbor, saying, "They get special treatment because of that chair. It's not fair." Her voice was sharp, filled with contempt for Lily's condition. John clenched his fists but kept quiet. He didn't want trouble, not yet. He could handle the pressure of being a county sheriff, but here, he was just a father trying to keep his daughter safe. The neighborhood could feel the tension building, and John could see it in Karen's eyes. She wasn't just trying to control them, she wanted them gone. Trouble was brewing, and he knew it wouldn't stay small much longer. It was a hot summer day, and the Willow Creek community pool was bustling with children splashing and laughing. Lily loved being there, even though she couldn't swim. Her condition made her legs too weak, and her lungs couldn't handle the water. She sat in her wheelchair near the edge, smiling as she watched the kids. John sat nearby on a bench, sipping a cold drink and keeping an eye on her, as always. Everything seemed peaceful, until Karen Mitchell showed up. Karen marched in, her face red with anger. She spotted Lily's wheelchair and stormed over to them. "This isn't a handicap zone," she shouted, pointing at the chair. There was plenty of room, and Lily wasn't blocking anything, but Karen didn't care. John stood up, his voice firm but quiet. "She's not in the way, Karen. Back off." But Karen didn't listen. Her eyes narrowed, and she stepped closer, shaking with rage. Before John could stop her, Karen grabbed the handles of Lily's wheelchair. "Maybe this will teach you," she sneered, and with one hard push, she shoved the chair toward the pool. It tipped over the edge, and Lily fell in with a scream. The wheelchair sank quickly, and Lily splashed in the deep end, flailing her arms. She couldn't swim, and her body wouldn't cooperate. The crowd went silent, then gasped. John didn't hesitate. He dropped his drink and dove into the pool, cutting through the water. He reached Lily in seconds, wrapping his arms around her as she coughed and cried, her small body shaking. He pulled her to the shallow end and climbed out, holding her tight against his chest, his shirt soaked, his heart pounding with fury, but he kept it inside for now. Karen stood there, arms crossed, smirking. "She's fine," she said, rolling her eyes. "Stop overreacting." Neighbors stared, some pulling out their phones to record the scene. Mrs. Carter covered her mouth in shock. John gently set Lily down on the ground, making sure she could breathe. Then, he stood up, water dripping from him. He turned to Karen. With one swift motion, he took off his wet jacket and revealed his sheriff's badge. "You assaulted my daughter," he said, his voice low and hard. "I'm the county sheriff." Karen's smirk disappeared. Her face turned white, and her mouth opened, but no words came out. The crowd murmured louder, some still recording the scene. John didn't raise his voice. His badge spoke for him. Karen took a step back, her hands trembling now for a different reason. She knew she had gone too far, and there was no way out. Lily, cold and wet, clung to John, her small arms wrapped tightly around his neck, her breaths quick and scared. Water dripped from her hair onto his soaked shirt. He grabbed a towel from a nearby chair and wrapped it around her, pulling her close. "You're safe now," he whispered, his voice soft but steady. Lily buried her face in his chest, still coughing a little. Her wheelchair had sunk to the bottom of the pool. John rubbed her back, his heart aching as he felt her tremble. Karen stood a few feet away, her face pale. "I didn't mean it," she stammered. "It was an accident. She's fine." The neighbors weren't buying it. People in the crowd muttered angrily, some still holding up their phones. A man shouted, "You pushed her in." Karen's eyes darted around, looking for a way out, but the crowd's anger was growing. John ignored her excuses. He pulled out his phone and called his deputies. "I need backup at the Willow Creek pool," he said, his tone sharp. He sat Lily down on a bench, keeping the towel around her, then stepped toward Karen, his sheriff's badge still gleaming. He pulled handcuffs from his pocket and grabbed her wrists. "You're under arrest for assault," he said coldly, his voice clear and firm. He read her rights, each word like ice. Karen squirmed, whining, "This is ridiculous," but John didn't flinch. He clicked the cuffs tight. Soon, 2 deputies arrived and took Karen to their car. The neighbors quietly clapped, some nodding at John with respect. He turned back to Lily, scooping her up in his arms. She felt lighter than ever, her wet clothes sticking to her. He carried her away from the pool, his boots squishing with every step. In his mind, he promised that this nightmare with Karen was over, and he would make sure of it. When they got home, he set Lily on the couch, wrapping her in a dry blanket. Her shivering slowed, but her eyes were still wide. There was a knock at the door. It was Mrs. Carter, holding a tray with 2 mugs of tea. Her hands trembled a little, and her eyes were wet with tears. "I saw it all," she said, her voice cracking. "You're a good man, John, and Lily's a brave girl." She set the tea down and patted Lily's hand. John nodded, his throat tight. "Thank you," he managed. Mrs. Carter smiled proudly and left them alone. John sat beside Lily, sipping the tea, feeling the weight of the day. Justice had begun, but he wouldn't rest until it was finished. A week later, the HOA called an emergency meeting at the Willow Creek clubhouse. Everyone was there, whispering about what had happened. Karen Mitchell, out on bail, sat in the front row, her arms crossed. She looked smug, like she had already won. "It was a misunderstanding," she said loudly when the meeting began. "People are making it bigger than it is." But her voice was weaker than usual. John Harper wasn't buying it, and neither were the others. John walked in, not as the quiet dad from Elm Street but as the county sheriff. He wore his full uniform, his badge shining on his chest, his hat tucked under his arm. People stared as he took a spot at the front. He wasn't hiding anymore. He carried a thick folder and a USB drive. The HOA board, 3 nervous-looking members, sat at the table, avoiding his gaze. John stepped up and began speaking, his voice strong and clear. "I've got proof," he said. He plugged the USB into a laptop and played videos from the pool. Phones had caught everything. The crowd was silent as they watched the footage. Karen's smirk faded. Her reign was over. The room fell silent as everyone watched Karen shove Lily's wheelchair into the pool, her angry shout echoing through the air. "Maybe this will teach you," she had yelled, and then gasps filled the room as the reality of what had just happened sank in. John Harper stood at the front, holding a stack of papers, old fines, complaints, and all the petty things Karen had written about Lily's ramp, her therapy equipment, even her humming. "She's been targeting my daughter for months," he said, his voice steady but filled with anger. "This wasn't an accident." He handed over statements too. Mrs. Carter, the sweet old lady next door, had written how Karen had scared everyone with her harshness, and other neighbors added their stories. One by one, people began speaking out. Mrs. Carter stood, her voice shaky but loud. "She fined me for my flowers last year," she said. A man in the back shouted, "She yelled at my kids for riding their bikes." More voices joined in, each one telling how Karen had bullied them for years. The room hummed with anger, the HOA board shifting uncomfortably in their seats, looking sweaty and trapped. They had allowed Karen to run the neighborhood for too long, and now it was all falling apart. John turned to face the board, his sheriff badge catching the light. "Karen needs to go," he said, his voice firm. "She's not fit for the HOA. She's hurt my daughter, and she's hurt this entire neighborhood." The crowd erupted into applause, some people cheering, "Get her out." Karen's face turned red and then pale as she tried to argue, her voice shaking. "This is unfair," she protested. But no one listened. The board members whispered among themselves, then the head of the board nodded. "We vote to remove her," he said, his voice small. "She's done." Karen slumped in her chair, humiliated, her power slipping away. John didn't smile. He just nodded and packed up his folder, leaving the room that now felt lighter. Karen's reign had ended, and Willow Creek was finally ready to change. After the HOA meeting, Karen's troubles didn't end. The law quickly caught up with her. She was charged with felony assault on a minor and reckless endangerment for pushing Lily into the pool. John, as the county sheriff, made sure the case was solid, but it wasn't just about being sheriff to him, it was about being Lily's dad. A few weeks later, the trial began in the county courthouse. Karen sat in the courtroom, looking smaller than ever, her smug expression replaced with a nervous, defeated one. John took the stand in his uniform, his sheriff's badge gleaming. He told the judge everything, how Karen had targeted Lily for months, how she had shoved her wheelchair into the water, and how Lily couldn't swim. John's voice remained steady, but it quivered slightly when he said, "She's my daughter. I pulled her out, scared and coughing." The courtroom was silent as everyone listened, the evidence mounting against Karen. The videos from the pool were shown again, the footage capturing Karen's angry shove. Mrs. Carter and other neighbors testified as well, explaining how Karen had been cruel for years. The jury deliberated for a short time before returning with a verdict. The judge looked at Karen and said, "Guilty." She was sentenced to 3 years in jail, with no chance to wiggle out of it. On top of that, she was ordered to pay large fines, some of it to cover Lily's medical expenses from the incident, including checkups and extra therapy she needed to feel safe again. The rest of the money went toward punishing her actions. Karen's head dropped as the deputies led her away, her hands cuffed again. John didn't stay to watch her leave. He had work to do. Later that day, he went to the station to oversee her booking. He stood with his arms crossed while deputies took her fingerprints and mug shot. Karen didn't look at him, she kept her eyes on the floor, muttering under her breath. John made sure everything was done correctly, no mistakes, no favors. He was professional, but he didn't feel happy about it. Seeing her locked up didn't bring him joy. Instead, it brought him quiet relief. Lily wouldn't have to fear her anymore. That was enough. Back home, John sat with Lily on the couch. She was doing better now, her smile returning slowly. The fines from Karen's actions had helped pay for a new wheelchair since the old one had been ruined in the pool. John watched Lily draw pictures, her small hands steady as she worked. He thought about the trial, the jail cell, and the money Karen had to pay. It wasn't about winning or revenge, it was about keeping his little girl safe. The law had done its part, and now John had done his. Willow Creek was finally free of Karen, and John could breathe a little easier, knowing that Lily's world was brighter. Weeks passed since Karen's incarceration, and Willow Creek began to feel different. Lily stayed with John in their small house on Elm Street. The pool incident had scared her, but every day she was getting stronger. John had gotten her a new wheelchair, shiny and smooth, replacing the one ruined in the pool. He also bought her a soft, warm blanket, bright purple, her favorite color. Lily would wrap it around herself and smile again, just like she used to. One sunny afternoon, John pushed Lily around the yard. Her laughter filled the air, the sound of joy returning. The trauma of the past was still there, but it was fading, and John could see the light coming back in her eyes. With Karen gone, the neighborhood had started to change too. The HOA stopped being so strict. No more silly fines, no more angry notes. People were more relaxed, and they started coming by to see Lily and John. Mrs. Carter, the sweet neighbor, brought over a plate of warm cookies one day. "For my brave girl," she said, patting Lily's hand. Lily grinned and shared one with John. The kids who used to play with Lily came back too, knocking on the door with a new ball. "Can Lily come out?" they asked. John pushed her outside, and the kids tossed the ball gently, laughing as Lily caught it. The street felt alive again, like Karen's shadow had finally lifted. One quiet evening, Lily sat with John on the porch, the sun setting and painting the sky orange. She looked up at him, her eyes wide and bright. "You're my hero, Dad," she said softly. John's heart swelled, and he pulled her close, hugging her tightly. "You're mine too," he whispered. For the first time in a long while, he felt peace. There were no more fights, no more fear, just him and Lily, safe together. He knew they would be okay now. The ramp outside their house stayed there. One day, the neighborhood kids grabbed some paint, red, blue, yellow, and turned it into a bright, messy masterpiece. Lily watched from her chair, clapping as they worked. "It's pretty," she said, and John nodded. It wasn't just a ramp anymore, it was a symbol that things were better. Willow Creek wasn't perfect, but it was lighter now. People waved when they passed by, and the air didn't feel heavy anymore. Karen's mean rules were gone, and the neighborhood could finally breathe. John and Lily continued their quiet life, rebuilding it step by step. He pushed her to the park, or they sat outside with lemonade, watching the world go by. The cookies, the ball, the painted ramp, they were small things, but they meant everything. Lily's smile was back, and John's heart was full. They had made it through together, and that was all that mattered.